Does the Anacrusis have an AI director? Yes, but let's not just talk about that. Let's just talk about how when you make games, you don't make them in a vacuum, and you make them based on everything you've done before, and often solving problems that you've encountered before and you realize you can solve them. In my case, for Anacrusis, we actually solved not just Left 4 Dead problems, we solved something from Half-Life 2 Episode 2. But let's get into this. Okay, so what is an AI director? Back in the day, well, some games had some randomization to it. Most shooters had, you open the door and there were 3 enemies over there and you're going to have to deal with them. You open the next door, there's going to be health, and you can charge up for the next battle, and then you're going to get a new weapon, and then you're going to get 5 enemies in the next room. Like, very much predictable patterns of play, and that's how you played, and your expression of skill is how well you dealt with those. Left 4 Dead broke that up, right? And so it's just not, people think it's the AI director, this piece of AI sitting on top, but really it is the knowledge of the map and the world that you need to have for that to work. So the AI director of Left 4 Dead was a really simple idea in a way. It was, let's control pacing where it's not tied to individual rooms and spaces, but instead kind of ebbs and flows. Because we want to have the feeling of you're in a horror, think about it like horror movies. You just don't have constant action and running around, right? You have those moments of sitting back, worried, wondering, like that anticipation of the fear and building, and that's what comes. And so we wanted to bring that into the game space. And so with that, you can't have predictability. So at first, the Left 4 Dead series was just nothing when you started. It was just, there were no breaks. It was just this kind of chaos the entire time. And you never knew, because one of the things I really like about this, like one of the positives here, is you have those moments then when you're building a map out, when you're building a space, that you're not just building for this encounter is going to happen here, this encounter is going to happen here, but you actually have this like, oh my God, I hope we don't get a brute here. I hope we don't get a tank here. I hope there's not a smoker. I hope I don't get grabbed off of here, right? You have that fear of what the combination could be happening. And you can't have it happen all the time, otherwise it gets predictable and boring, right? So I have started new level designers on these kind of games, and so often they'll be like, oh, well, it just 50% of the time, a little guy will come down from that vent and he'll scare you, and then he'll go back and away. Eventually people will play the game enough because they're made to be replayable that they're going to give a name for the Venti, and Venti comes down and gets you, right? Like, because it's predictable. And even things that feel good, like the first couple times that they just randomly happen, players or designers will sometimes try to force it. But then that quickly ruins that fun of it and the excitement of that. And you want to have that kind of randomness that's happening. So there's a lot of randomness to that. But to do that, the game needs to understand the map. So here, I'll show you this picture here. And this is for the Anacrusis. And this is the simplest map you can have in the Anacrusis. It has to have a start point and an end point. You look at that little golden line there? That is the golden path. And so that lets us know here's the start of the map and here's the end of the map. Left 4 Dead has something similar with its nav mesh. We actually realized nav mesh was the biggest thing stopping modders in Left 4 Dead. God, those people are so good at that and so smart. But we wanted to solve that. So we do automatic nav mesh in the Anacrusis, but we still have this golden path needs to be connected because we need to know the beginning and the end. And then the director can use this information and spawn into the world. And so this is kind of like breaking up and kind of how everything is happening. Because one of the things in these kind of games that we learned in Left 4 Dead was the longer you are in the map, the harder the map is. It doesn't even make a difference. Like you can, there's a whole bunch of study we did of like, if you do a long hallway with doors to the side, people are going to go slower because they're worried about what's coming, versus like a big open space, they'll move faster through, but they're also looking for stuff. And in Left 4 Dead, we have this problem of, hey, I've got everything I need. I don't need to go off the path. If you actually go off in the Left 4 Dead world or the Anacrusis world, there's a bunch of places you've never been because you don't need to go there, but there's stuff spawns. Now in Anacrusis, you tend to go to these places because you want this stuff. And I'll explain that in a minute. But in Left 4 Dead, there's this, you kind of cap it. And this is when I first saw that was when we were working on White Forest for Half-Life 2 Episode 2. And if you're not familiar with it, it's this big wide open space. It's this big battle. It's really fun, but people were getting lost. And so Dario's working on the map. I'm doing the audio stuff that's playing dynamically through there. And needed to be able to have the players understand where to battle to. Like my callouts weren't working on their own. We needed to give some more. And so we put a radar into the buggy. But the problem with the radar into the buggy was you were learning this for the first time and seeing that while under fire. So I think the map before that, we created an area where you can go discover how to use it, and you go find these caches. The problem in Half-Life 2 Episode 2 is you have health, you have shields, you have weapons and ammo and grenades. But you can cap all of those really quickly, and then you don't need to go. So I felt like going to find these caches was kind of this letdown, like, oh God, I don't need any of this stuff, come on. And so what can you do to pull people off of that, right? Because again, if you want to make the game harder, but not in just throw more enemies at you, which is a fun thing, but can be fatiguing, but making players have to think in a different way, is getting them to go off the path and go search. And so we do that in a couple ways. So if you played Left 4 Dead, you may remember, like, you're going to go down in the subway and you're going to look, hey, is the upgraded weapons here, or are the upgraded weapons there? Or, oh, no upgraded weapons in this. Like, right, there's this very predictable way of where those spawns happen. We move that out in the Anacrusis and put that into the AI director, and those can spawn anywhere, because if you're a really good team moving through really fast, we're going to put those way off the path and you're going to have to go hunt for them. But if you're struggling, we're going to put those in the beginning, we're going to put those in the middle, we're going to put those right down the path so that you don't have to go off the golden path that much, because that way you're not spending as much time in the map searching around for stuff, and you get these better weapons. Now, side note, complaint about Anacrusis, which I'll agree with, is that the opening weapons aren't that amazing, because we wanted you to go look for those other weapons. But did we make those starter weapons not good enough that you wanted to use them enough to go find those? Right? It's always a balance of what you're trying to do there, because you're trying to put the players at a disadvantage and then have them find the advantage. If you don't care for the opening weapons and you struggle with that, fair. Okay. But the other thing we do is we do those weapons that way, but we also do grenades spread around the map, and that you should just throw the grenades in the Anacrusis. It's still a learning hurdle for people, but just throw grenades, because there's grenades everywhere. They're just going to keep coming, because we purposely wanted to have a ton of grenades in the world and cause chaos. But that's still not enough to push the players off the path. So we needed to give them something where they couldn't cap out. They couldn't cap out and hold all the grenades and have full health and have the gun they want. Well, so that's the Meta compilers. So a Meta compiler gives you a perk. And the perk is something like, hey, it's going to increase your overall health permanently. It's going to let you carry more grenades. It's going to change the way this weapon works and give you penetration. Like, it's going to give you these different perks. It's going to give you those grenades you throw that are goo now heal you, right? Like, it gives you these perks that you can just keep adding to them. And every time you go to a Meta compiler, you know you're going to find a new one. So it's worth finding a Meta compiler for. So we actually give it a little tone so that pushes you off the path to go look for it. And that becomes this important thing of then you always have a reason to be exploring and going off the path. And then we also have a different way for you to kind of grow as a player in power. And so those work together, and that's just a really good way that we didn't have that in Half-Life 2 Episode 2. We didn't have that in Left 4 Dead as a way to push you off the path and reward you. And that's why those exist. And so if you're struggling, again, we'll put those in the middle of the path. But the other thing that can really make it harder or play with difficulty is spawning behind. Now, in the Left 4 Dead, you can break spawn. You can go look at a room, tag it, and nothing will ever spawn there then. And so while the Anacrusis does some of that while you're playing single player or multiplayer co-op, it will spawn from behind if you're doing really well, because that's dead as a threat then that slows you down and makes you move slower through it, and it kind of breaks it up. But we also then do inverses in Left 4 Dead, it can be frustrating to be on the zombie side, because you'll have your spawn points removed from you because one player will go break spawn, or they'll do two. It's normally 2 and 2. And it makes it really hard for you to find a place to spawn. In Anacrusis, we fixed that, and we don't do that. And so that you can still spawn in those areas, and you can spawn between groups of players. Not visible, right? But we give you a lot more options so that players need to be on their toes more, because it's about, in that case, the survivors having a harder time. And so that's how we've taken what I've learned making these games all these years, and putting it into the Anacrusis and putting it in then the AI director, so that we can challenge you in different ways, and then also understand when you're struggling, that we can give you some benefit. But even there, like, if you're a really good team, you're not going to find health right on the path. You're going to have to go hunt for it, because we think you're good enough to go do that. And so it's not really rubber banding you, but giving you a challenge that you're able to resolve in a way with the skill set and the tools that you have. So that is, yes, we have an AI director, and yes, throw grenades like crazy because it will help. And if you want to check it out and play some more, you can always join us at discord.gg/StrayBombay. We're always playing over there, and there'll be a ton of people that'll help you learn and play the game.